Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar from Adventist Risk Management. My name is David Fournier. I work here at Adventist Risk Management. I serve as the Chief Client Care Officer, and I'm really happy that you are taking time out of your busy schedules to focus on this topic, safety officers, and the opportunity that they have to make a real difference for the church. Maybe you are a safety officer at your church or school. I'm probably going to use the terminology church oriented today a little bit more than school, but please be assured if you're coming from a school perspective, this all applies to you as well. But I am really interested and concerned right now, especially in the opportunity we have at our churches, because there are some unique characteristics to the church experience and caring for safety in a church environment. But again, this will all apply to schools as well. We'll use other webinars, other presentations and media to explore schools more fully. As we get going, just a few notes of business. I see that Elizabeth, who's helping me, has given us a good orientation in the chat feature already. Also want you to be aware of the Q&A feature, which Elizabeth mentioned as well. I just wanted to say about the questions, I'm delighted when I get questions that I can interact with thoughts and ideas that you have. Sometimes we get a lot of questions, sometimes we get very few, but I want, if your answer doesn't get, your question doesn't get answered during the live webinar, I don't want you to feel left out. Sometimes we have to pick and choose a little bit. We may not get to absolutely every one. Hopefully we'll close the loop with you via email offline, but we really do try to get to all of them. Today I have probably, again, as usual, more material than time, so I want to get right into it. So let's talk about safety officers. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has been talking about the idea of safety officers in many conferences. Churches have implemented a safety officer over the last probably 10, 15 years. I would actually go back a little, maybe another 5 years, 20 years. There have been churches implementing safety officers as part of the team, the volunteer leadership team of the local church or school. So we want to explore the role of that, because there are also many churches and schools and conferences that have just not explored this idea at all. And that's going to be the purpose of this webinar. I want to give an orientation to the role of the safety officer, what it is that they're trying to achieve. And I hope that you see a common theme throughout this webinar that is really all about the resources of where are you going to find the tools that you need to do your job? What is it that you're going to want to focus on, and how are you going to get that done? What tools do you have? What reference? I've served in a few different positions in my local church, and some come with a lot of information and resources, and I know exactly what to do, and other roles, and maybe this was even more frequent, just didn't have a lot of information. So we want to equip you. We want to make sure that you have all the tools you need, or maybe you're listening in thinking of some team member of yours, or how to implement this in your conference. Actually recognize a few names on the attendee list here today, and really nice to see folks. Well, nice to see everyone, but it's nice to recognize some names there. So that's fun. Okay, don't get distracted, Dave. Let's get into this. Let's start off and explore some of what the safety officer is really all about. I'm going to start off with a resource. The safety officer, it's kind of like a brochure, a flyer, an info sheet, if you will. It's like a front and back, and it really just describes the role of the safety officer. This would be your quick and easy job description. This is available on our website, adventistrisk.org. if you look in the safety section, but it's going to talk about different things that a safety officer might be involved in doing and leading out in. One of the really key ones, tasks that you might be asked to do is to conduct a self-inspection. Um, this is a very, very important part of the risk management process. And really a safety officer is a key risk management partner. Self-inspection allows us to go and take a guided tour, so to speak, of our facility, take a look at certain key ideas like what are our emergency equipment. Well, I'll get into some of the details of what we're going to look for in a self-inspection later. But it's going to put eyes on in an inspection type format. And you're going to say, okay, here's what I have, here's what I don't have. And this is a great starting place to help you evaluate your own location. We have some resources on that too, but this is just one of the areas, and it's a good starting place. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Another area that of emphasis and focus for a safety officer is emergency planning. We're going to talk a bit about that today as well. Having a church or school prepared for the different types of emergencies that it may face requires some planning. You can't prevent absolutely everything from happening that could happen in the world, but having a plan of what you're going to do when some of those things might take place is a great head start in order to respond in a more positive, proactive, and effective way. So someone needs to spearhead and take on that role of emergency planning, not to do it alone. And then incident response. What if somebody slipped and fell at potluck? You know, somebody should kind of write down that happened and maybe why it happened and what happened exactly and who did it happen to, and kind of record that. Maybe nothing comes of it. Maybe there's no claim. Maybe there's, the person's fine, but someone should pay attention to the fact that happened. Maybe it keeps happening. Sometimes we don't notice these trends if we're not paying attention and documenting it. What if a claim did arise out of that later on? Somebody, discovers that they're experiencing back pain that they trace back to that incident, and 6 months later they decide to file a claim. Where's the information? Where's the documentation on that? Well, at that point, it's just it's harder to collect all the good data of what exactly took place 6 months out. So that's a role that a safety officer might help ensure is taking place in the church. I believe that the safety officer should be on the board. I've heard some folks think that, oh, maybe they shouldn't. I'm not really bothered by the conversation, but here's what I want to see happen. I want safety to be intrinsic to our ministry approach in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I want us to care about people. That's what Christ did. He cared about people's well-being. He spent a lot of his ministry time focused on people's well-being. And I think one of the ways that we can do that in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, especially in the North American context, is by being very proactive in our approach to ensuring that our children, our members, our guests, our visitors, and those in our community that we're inviting to engage with us, that they're engaging with us in a safe environment where we've gone a little bit above and beyond to make sure that we care about their well-being. So how do we do that? Well, we need to make sure that it's a priority across all of our ministries. And one of the ways we can do that is include this conversation in our boards at the church. Bring the safety issues to the bigger conversation. Let the other ministry directors and representatives participate here, learn, know about the various risk management issues. It can't be accomplished by one person alone. So engaging with the wider team is very important. This person can help then spearhead safety education, We'll talk about a safety committee. There are some of these tasks are probably not best done by one individual all on their own. So maybe a safety committee is appropriate at some locations. I think for a very, very, very small church, sometimes a safety committee might not work. It might not make practical sense. But for a larger facilities, sometimes it is really, really helpful to do that. But also you look at some of the processes that may be involved with different safety topics like security, child protection, activity planning, and immediately it becomes obvious that this needs to be done with a broader group than simply one individual. So let's look at what resources we have for a safety committee. We have, again, an info sheet freely available on our website talking about the role and opportunity of the church safety committee. If you're forming a church safety committee at your local church, you might want to print and provide this resource to the team as you get started, just kind of orienting them to what opportunity they have. We encourage that they meet on a regular basis, keep minutes, stay organized. This is a great group of people to be working on an emergency plan. And some of these tasks will help you as you form who should be on the safety committee as well. So we have some ideas. Whoa, okay, we're spinning. I'm going to start with the red one here, the pastor. Maybe you're thinking, well, having all these lay people involved as a safety officer and on the safety committee is trying to keep some of these tasks out of the pastor's hair, so to speak. And I think that is actually a smart way to go about it. But I do think it's really important for our pastors, our leaders, to, while they may not have to do everything and take everything on themselves, it's important that they understand and support and know what's going on in every aspect of ministry, including this one. I've met many, many pastors who are absolute champions of risk management at their church, and others who are a bit less aware of how this impacts ministry. So for those champions, we appreciate you, we love you. And for those who need to learn, we need to find ways of effectively communicating this opportunity to them and bring them on board with the safety needs that our churches have. And we need to do that sensitively. Let me just pause and comment on that for a second. I have run into, from time to time, someone who maybe comes across as overzealous, who's passionate about safety or security, emergency planning, and is just on board. And on one hand, I'm excited, I'm pleased, I'm so thankful for their passion in this ministry. That's a good thing. But sometimes they burn their bridges a bit because they're not able to convince, and then they just keep going at it like a bull in a china shop. So I think we have to, use our social skills, our people smarts, and bring people along. And you may encounter people on your church board, in your church leadership team, who maybe aren't all the way there yet. The best way, I think, is to make your interactions with them a positive experience. Show the value. Make them attracted to this idea. And sometimes that happens over time. Sometimes that's the best approach. And a step forward is always better than no steps forward, even if it's not everything that you're hoping to achieve all at once. So I encourage you to stay passionate, but also let's be strategic in achieving those things which drive the greater goals of our organization, our big picture goals of ministry. risk management sits at a very interesting place in ministry. If we were to manage all of our risks most effectively, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, right? Uh, everything we do has risk involved. Obviously, not getting out of bed in the morning, not doing things, not doing ministry is not an option. That is not a good thing. That is not achieving the goal that we're here to achieve. So finding that balance of engaging in our ministries in a focused way that is extremely effective is what we're trying to do. So that gets me to what is our goal right here. I think our goal is to have safe facilities and activities where people can come and there's not a large barrier to entry for participating in our activities or coming and enjoying our facilities, but in enough of a safety measure to make that experience a positive one without incident or injury. And these are some of the tools that we're going to use, or topics that we're going to talk about, that help us get to that balanced state of staying focused on ministry, getting those things done effectively in a way that doesn't leave damage and injury in its wake. So I want to share with you a package of information that you may have received already, either in early September, early or late August, and that is the church safety package. This is a package of material that Adventist Risk Management put together and sent out to every church across the North American division. It is, a paper package. We just wanted to kind of get this information out in front of everyone so that you could see it. All of this exists in digital form on our website, and we just wanted to get that distributed out and help people know that this information is there and available. There's one particular item on here that I really want to draw your attention to, and that because it has some real dollar value, and that is the training voucher from Alice. Some of you may have heard of the company Alice. They provide training for violent incidents. The training voucher, is valued at $25. We bought one for every single church and school across the North American division. You can use that to go and take that $25 course for free. We've paid for that for you already. We really encourage you to do that. It's just an online course. It should take you, I think I took about an hour and a half or so to go through all of the material. It was specifically oriented to houses of worship. So they're not just talking about a business environment or something like that. It is designed around issues specific to houses of worship. There is also a different package that was built for schools that we sent to every school across the North American division. That has some other resources. It has basically the textbook on school security, and it also has a training voucher for the same violent incident training, but for schools. So I want you to be aware of that. Use the little link on that. It's adventistrisk.org/Alice, and that will take you to the free training. I know some folks have already started that training, but I'm hoping that everyone's going to take advantage of that. Obviously, there is a limited number of seats available, but there are enough seats for at least one person at every church across the division. So please do make use of that. At the very least, it will be an introduction to a very important topic, and I found it very informative and useful, practical information. I thought it was very helpful. I don't really endorse one company over another. We happen to work with Alice just because they were able to accomplish this resource for us. So, and I thought they had a a very good program. There's some other really great programs out there if you're looking for those kind of resources. So we'll talk more about that kind of thing here in a bit. Oh, I guess I should have moved on to this slide while I talked about that a little bit. There is the link. If you go to adventistrisk.org/Alice, it will get you there. Or if you do it exactly the way it is on the screen, that'll get you there as well. This is what the page will look like. And for those of you in schools, there's the K through 12 schools one. And then you could also click on the houses of worship one if you're at a church. So please have somebody at your church go through that material. And probably a safety officer would be a good choice for that. I hope you find that helpful. Another new area of resources on Adventist Risk Management's website, adventistrisk.org, is on wildfire prevention and safety resources. We built a whole new section on this. The church experienced the largest property loss of its entire history. Well, I want to say last year, might be the year before now. I'm getting to that time of the year where I'm starting to mix up my 2020s, 2019s, and 2018s. And it was due to wildfire. Some of you may have heard about the wildfires in California, and certainly we had a devastating experience out there. There is quite a bit of information on wildfire, preventing wildfires from damaging your facilities. There are strategies you can take to at least minimize the effects or control it. There are great bits of information on how you can build to be resistant to that. So if an organization is in that build phase, there are some choices they could make that would be make their building more resistant to that. So those resources are on the website as well. So let's talk about self-inspections a little bit. I just want to give you a taste for what this looks like. And again, tying the safety officer role back to the ministry team, which typically takes place at the board level. You want this report to come back to the church board so that they review this information. You want to do at least one of these self-inspections at least once a year. I would recommend more than that, but I think once a year would be a good place to start. And we have asked conferences to include some questions regarding risk management on their conference financial audits. So these are not, there's not a lot of those questions, but one of the questions would be, has this church conducted a self-inspection? Because engaging in the process is a really great first step. It is valuable information. You'll probably learn more about your facility than you expected to. All right, let's keep going. Here we go. Here's what the self-inspection form looked like. This is what would have been in your package. There's a bit of a cover sheet there, and I think there's 9 or 10 pages, and it's going to walk you through this first page. I know it's a little small print, and we're not really trying to look at it here today, but the first page here has administrative type questions like, do you have a written church emergency plan? Do you have a safety committee? Do you do criminal background screening? These are some of those kinds of questions. You're also going to have other sections like dealing with your baptismal tank, or if you have a kitchen or dining room type area. What about the parking lot? All these different types of zones that most churches would have. And it's going to have a number of questions that will help you look at various issues in that way. There is also, for those from the school community, there is a school self-inspection form on our website as well. And there is also one for camps, for summer camps. So, so many resources. I know Elizabeth's trying really hard to keep up with all the resources I'm mentioning over there, and I may have surprised her with adding a few more to the list. So as you go through that form, it basically is written along the lines of if the answer that you wrote in the form is a no to the question, then that's usually not a good thing, right? So it's written in such a way as the better answer, of course, is yes. Do you have this thing in place that is a good thing? Yes, we do. Great. But if you do answer no, then there's going to be a space to describe what's going on, or what it is that is recommended to do about it. Sometimes it's going to be a very simple, tighten a screw on the railing so that it's not because it's a little bit shaky or whatnot. Sometimes it's going to be a bit more serious and may need to be taken up with finance and bring it to the board and get some budget set aside for that. Maybe even some planning for that. But this will document that process for you and allow you to bring that report to the board. So this is the kind of thing that you might be asked to look at as you're going through the self-inspection. This is a fire extinguisher, and I think we were looking at this particular one in 2016, and it had last been inspected in July of 2012. And those should be serviced on an annual basis. So that one was way out of date. We have a few of these kind of photos that we see when we get to look around at some locations. Protection elements you're going to be looking for, like we just saw, fire extinguishers, sprinkler systems, smoke detectors, fire alarm systems, security systems. These are the kind of things it's going to ask you about, you're looking for. And also, are they being serviced? Are they up to date? Are they functional? A lot of these have, like a smoke detector is going to have a test button. You're going to want to know, test it. Yep, it's working. Terrible noise. You're going to see opportunities like slips, trips, and falls. This can happen to sidewalks. Sometimes they settle and you end up with these terrible tripping hazards. This kind of thing happened to the sidewalk in front of my house, and I came home one day as the elderly lady was walking by, and she just happened to fall right when I walked by, so I was able to help her up. But if that sidewalk would have been well maintained and kept level, that wouldn't have happened. Other things you're going to look for are, wrinkled carpets or cables strung across where people are walking. Those things should be avoided. And this self-inspection form are going to help you with that. You're going to see things like, are exit doors unlocked? You want to make sure that the door opens in the correct direction. You want your exit doors, especially for emergency egress, to have the panic hardware, so that people are able to, in a panic, just break through and go straight out without having to use fine motor skills that they may not have going on. Right. I'm going to move quickly through some of these because I'm just trying to give you an idea of what you're going to find in these resources. There is a whole section on mother's rooms. This is an actual photo from a mother's room that we were asked to look at, and as you can see, the crib area here is perhaps not ideal. In fact, it's absolutely terrible. And what we've found is, in many cases, people donate things that are not working right or broken, and because it's free, we use it, or we're really hesitant to let go of things we have, even though they're broken. So really important that when something like this is broken, that it be removed. I would even say destroyed, so that it can't be used, and you'd be held responsible for making it available to anyone. But the mother's room section is going to talk about making sure the little bits and bobs on the floor have been picked up. Usually when I look through a mother's room, I find a screw on the floor. a little nut, a washer, one thing or another. And that is really disappointing, because those kinds of items are going to go into a child's mouth, and maybe a choking hazard certainly doesn't belong in there. So these are some of the things you're going to look at there. I'm not going to get into great detail on this. Baptismal tank, guidance to not use the wired microphones. Don't see that a lot anymore anyway, but just making sure that it is being, has the shut off, that it's been well maintained. This is an area that you can have a couple of things happen. You can have electrocution around a baptismal tank. It is a place where, if it's unsupervised and people have access to it, a child could drown in there. And we've also are aware of them being used as a sort of a hidden place for things that we don't want to have happening where they might happen. So that is something we're looking at. Okay. A mechanical room. Mechanical rooms are unfortunately often used as storage, and they really need to not be used as storage, especially around your furnace area. Needs to be kept very, very clean, clear. You don't want flammables and combustibles in that area at all. Same is true for electrical panels, electrical areas. You can see probably, I hope you can see the challenge that's going on in this image. That is unfortunate. So you're going to be looking for those kind of items. Something else that we want to alert you to is that candles should not be used in our churches. The National Fire Protection Association's Life Safety Code really says no open flame devices or pyrotechnic device shall be used in any assembly occupancy. And there are some exceptions to that, very, very narrow exceptions, but bear in mind as well that ultimately the local authority, which is generally a fire marshal, is going to have the ultimate say on the exception there. So please take that concept of no candles very, very seriously, because they are just it's too much of a risk, especially when there are young people involved. And some of our buildings are older. And I don't know about your church, but I know mine is not just overflowing with cash. So a loss tends to hurt. So we're trying to avoid that. Maintenance. A safety officer wants to be aware of maintenance. That needs to be on their radar. The most frequent property claim received at ARM, this is not the highest dollar amount, but it is the most frequent one, is probably water damage of one form or another. And it does take a few different forms. But that is often connected with maintenance issues, either roofing that has, gutters haven't been cleaned and it just keeps building up, or we have frozen pipe issues, or there's a leak somewhere and it just continues to drain and drain and drain. Baptismal tanks that have been unsupervised, they may start leaking and no one knows about it for sometimes much too long. This causes real damage. Okay, and then the most common casualty claim we receive at ARM is along the lines of the slip and fall injury. Okay, so this is usually things like, the shaky handrail, the rolled up carpet that's, or a tear in the carpet, or a mat there at the entrance of the church, where people walk in and wipe their feet. These areas can cause some real issues. So we tie a lot of this back to maintenance, and maintenance is something that, while it's not glamorous, it's really, really hard to come up with great, compelling information on that. It is just so important. So I look for a safety officer to partner with whoever is spearheading maintenance and physical plant at the facility, making sure that there's a regular maintenance program to address those issues as they come up in a systematic way, so that it's not just solving problems when they happen, but preventing problems along the way, like keeping the gutters cleared, taking care of the walkways, making sure the roof is in great condition um, before the terrible windstorm reveals the flaws in the roof. Let's talk about emergency planning briefly. I hope you're aware of Safety Sabbath. This is an initiative of the North American Division in March of every year, basically encouraging churches to engage in emergency planning, to conduct a drill of some sort. We've produced materials on a number of different types of drills. Um, the type of drill most people are familiar with is a fire drill, but how many of our churches have actually conducted a fire drill at their church? There's a lot of reasons why people don't want to. This is not something that is popular with everyone, but I think if we could carve out at least once a year to focus on this, to get this kind of practice in, I think people will discover that it can be done effectively. It can be fairly painless. It doesn't have to take a long time, and there's no substitute for going through the motions, actually experiencing it physically. There are a lot of things that I encourage a church to do before they even get to the drill. Write the plan, discuss the plan, tabletop the plan, have the team that's actually conducting the drill go through the process on their own, walk through it, do a little walkthrough before ever bringing it up as an actual drill. That will make the experience, I think, more effective, and they will be better prepared. So again, our website has resources on this. We continue to develop those more and more, but we look for your support to engage our pastors, our leadership teams with the idea of Safety Sabbath, and really looking at it as a part of ministry. We are caring about people's well-being, and that is very much a ministry-centered philosophy and concept. These are some of the drills that we have prepared over the years. We do remind you that if you're engaging in these kinds of drills, it is a good idea, and mandatory in some cases, to coordinate with local first responders, law enforcement in some cases, before, during, and after, letting them know what's going on. And sometimes they could be a great support if you solicit that support as well. They could be very, very helpful in making that a success for you. Having a strong partnership with your local first responders is a very good idea. Get to know, build a positive relationship, have them get to know you, you get to know them, and build a partnership. That's the way to success in that area. Again, just want to remind you of the ALICE resource that you have in the safety package. I'm going to talk about security briefly. The reason I'm going to talk about it briefly is because I am planning a whole new package of information on security. We will do a webinar entirely on this particular topic. Actually, we did one already on school security, but we need to do one on church security because there are some very specific issues there as well. But I'm going to go through this material quickly for you. Start with perimeter information. Do you have a perimeter to your location? What does that look like? Have you kept your bushes and trees near the building trimmed? Sometimes somebody with ill intent will use cover to remain unseen or to gain access to your building that they would not otherwise have. Think of somebody who's looking to rob your building. If no one can see them in the dark at night behind a bush, they're going to be able to work away at that door or window, unobstructed. And security features can be amazing, locks and whatnot. Um, they're pretty much all defeatable though, given enough time and privacy and tools. So you don't want to make it easier by giving them the privacy to do that kind of thing. So another way to do that is to light the area up. Make sure that your parking areas are lit. This is also going to help with people tripping and falling in parking lots at night. And of course, outside of your doors and windows, security cameras are a good idea. I think security cameras can be part of a great security system. I was made aware of recently a church that was actually struggling with a security system, however, and they were incurring fines because they didn't seem to have a plan in place that was working. So some people knew how to turn the security system on when they went in and out, and other people didn't. Either they hadn't done the orientation, or they had handed out lots of keys but not given the codes. I'm not sure what was going on there, but whatever it was wasn't working. So important that as you implement any of these kinds of measures, that effective training, orientation, and controls be put in place. Keys, really short bullet point there, but kind of a big deal. When was the last time you rekeyed your facility? How many people currently have keys to that church? Keys are kind of, well, they have the properties kind of like a rabbit, in that there seem to be more of them very, very quickly. So I think it's really good to review who has keys, or at least who should have keys, and rekey on a somewhat regular basis. And that may be every 2 years, it may be every 3 or 5, depending on the type of facility you have and the type of turnover you may have in the various volunteer positions or the size of the congregation. But definitely something to think through. You want to control zone access. Some churches are going to have this as more of an issue than others. If you have a very small facility, maybe it's just all one area. And if somebody's meeting in the church, it's just kind of one place. But if you have different zones, like a meeting hall over here, classrooms over there, the whole lobby and sanctuary over here, the back offices and the baptistry. If someone is able to come into your building for a meeting in classroom A, do they now have access to absolutely everything in the building? Or can you make it so that you're only going over in the evening to classroom A, and that's really all you have access to, through the hallway. So if there is a way to control zone access, something to be explored. I'll talk more about team. I think there's so many potential team members to improve the security of our churches. I think the church has a real opportunity in this area. One I talked about already, several actually. There's of course the safety officer and the safety committee, but there's also local law enforcement. There's also, I believe, a real opportunity to partner with our hospitality team. Our hospitality teams, if they are proactive and effective, are out there reaching out to people. Maybe they're even out into the parking lot. One of the churches I attend from time to time has golf carts, and they come get you. They have a fairly large parking lot. They come looking for you. Hey, do you want to ride in? Sometimes at my church, our parking lot's not quite that large, but sometimes there'll be some folks out there from the hospitality team with an umbrella if it's raining. So they start proactively out on the exterior, meeting people as they're reaching the campus of the church. That's a real That's on the perimeter idea. If we look at security in semi-permeable membranes, that's your outer membrane, right? That is eyes and ears. That's a potential communication, um, a place that communication can take place. Somebody who can say, "Oh, this person is uh, appears agitated, um, and I'm going to radio or call that into um, my team members on the inside. Maybe it's a deacon or the safety officer or whoever is designated. We have something that we need to be aware of taking place. Then you have people at the door typically. Then you have people in the lobby and the entrance into the sanctuary. So there tends to be, in many churches, those natural meeting points where we can engage with, get to know people that and perceive what's going on with them. And we can learn more about how to recognize and understand when something isn't right and what to look for in that. Again, I'm going to go into this in much more detail in the future, in a future webinar. This is not the webinar for that. Security, establishing written plans, again, talking about the who should have the keys, how does the alarm system work, making sure that everybody's on that same page. Who's locking up when everything's over? Are they making sure that everything has been secured, that all doors and windows and especially access points have been secured? I talked a little bit about this already, establishing a greeter or hospitality team, what to recognize, and then somebody who's making sure that your hallways aren't being used inappropriately. Let's talk about activities and transportation. This is an area that safety officers can really provide some perspective across different types of ministries. Um, I think of Pathfinders immediately when I think of activities and transportation. Pathfinders are usually engaged in some really interesting activities, and they tend to go places. So uh, how do we plan those activities effectively, and how do we get them to and from that in a safe, effective manner that's appropriate for the type of organization we are? Um, so, you're going to be thinking through things like, do we have parental consent and medical release forms? Do we have the right supervision in place, adequate and qualified supervision? And then getting that safe transportation that's correctly insured. So here's another resource we have. I want you to be aware of this and use this. It is a trip offsite activity planning checklist. It's actually several pages long, and it's really just a great checklist to make sure that you have checked all your boxes in planning for an activity. And it's been built in a broad enough way that it should fit most types of activities that you would do. When we talk about consent forms and release forms, I want you to understand what those are and what they're for. They really achieve three things. They're trying to achieve three things. There's one thing that people often think that they achieve that they don't achieve. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this summer, and I was questioning an activity that they were planning, and I said, in what way is this insured? And because I wasn't aware of insurance for that, and the answer was, well, no, there's everybody in doing the activity has signed a release form, and oh, okay, well, just because people have signed a release form is not a get out of jail free card for your organization. It doesn't work that way. In fact, in many cases, the release form is going to be thrown out of the case in about 15 minutes. It's not usually going to save you in that way. So if Dave doesn't like these things, then what are they for, right? And should we use them? Absolutely. They're very important and you should use them. They are one of those things that a reasonable organization is expected to do. And here's what it's trying to achieve for you. You want consent to participate. So when a pathfinder is going to go on an activity, it is the parent or legal guardian who has the ability to consent to participate. The child is a minor, they can't legally do that. The pathfinder director is not the legal guardian or the parent of that child. They cannot do that. And unfortunately, I have heard of cases of pathfinder directors signing release forms on behalf of their club participants. That is an absolutely absurd idea that achieves nothing at all. If anything, it makes it worse. So getting that consent to participate, what does consent to participate really accomplish for us? What it's meant to do is it's meant to alert the person who should know the best what activities are being planned, and if that person thinks that their child, in this case, is capable of engaging in that activity. So if you're going to a park, for example, and you might be engaging in some hiking around, fine, check. We're going to be cleaning up some garbage. Okay, wear some gloves. Good, we like it. We're going to be doing some swimming. Whoa, my child doesn't swim. I'm concerned. I would like them to not be close to the water. Okay, this is their opportunity to tell you, no, we can't do that. So that's one of the three things that the form is trying to achieve. It's also giving us emergency medical treatment authorization, or it should do that, so that that authorization has already been given. The emergency is not the time to try to figure that out. That needs to have already taken place. And then, of course, contact information. So that the right people can be called in case something does go wrong. So critical. I'm not going to go over every bullet point on the screen here, but so critical that when we're doing these release forms, we are very specific to the actual activities taking place. What that is going to mean then, what follows from that is you can't plan certain activities and then have a last minute change and do different activities without changing, getting authorization for those new activities. Because if a child goes on an activity and the parent has signed off on X, Y, and Z, and instead we're doing A, B, and C, and there's an incident, that parent is going to be probably quite a bit more upset than and have cause for it than if they had signed off on an activity and that is what the child was doing. Make sense? Okay. I want to talk about 15 passenger vans because why not? 15 passenger vans continue to appear at church events and school events. I was recently at Oshkosh, the camporee in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and there were many 15 passenger vans present there. The church has not yet solved this problem and gotten away from the use of 15 passenger vans. What you see on the screen now is the North American Division policy that was voted back in, I believe, 2016. And it says, in the interest of safety, denominational organizations shall not purchase, lease, rent, or use 15 passenger vans for sponsored activities under any circumstances. Alternatives include minivans, SUVs, mini school buses, 15 passenger buses with dual rear wheels. So what is a 15 passenger van? I did a whole webinar on exactly that question. How do you figure out what is a 15 passenger van? Because I could buy a 15 passenger van, take a back seat out, and call it something else. Is it now a 15 passenger van? Well, is it only a 15 passenger van if it has 15 passengers in it? Well, as it turns out, what we mean by 15 passenger van is a van of a certain size, right? Could it be configured as a 15 passenger van? Whether you have that many seats or people, or maybe it comes from the factory with 12 seats in it, but it could have 15. Then it's a 15 passenger van. So ways you can figure that out is if it has a wheelbase over 135 inches, that's from wheel to wheel. If it has an overall length over 225 inches. I am sorry that this is such a confusing topic. It is challenging and it's no fun because those are some very convenient vans to use that are effectively priced. And it is really hard to change our habits in this area. But I think those families that have been impacted by the many deaths associated with these vans, do see the light and would prefer that we not use these. And again, I go back to, we have to think about the well-being of those that we are ministering to. And if we can't make that a pretty high priority, we need to choose how we engage with them very, very carefully. One of the ways we can do that is not using 15 passenger vans. So look for your support in that. This is a dual rear-wheeled 15 passenger bus, in case somebody wants to know what those look like. They look like that. That is one of those recommended solution alternatives to a 15 passenger van. So that's a good thing, what we're looking at now. You'll notice the dual rear wheels in the back there and reinforced superstructure. And you see the door on the side, but if you've ever been in one of these, you'll notice that the aisle for it is in the middle rather than on the side, which most 15 passenger vans have. Okay. Safety is more than 15 passenger vans, and that is a truism. Somebody asked, what are the statistics of 15 passenger vans in accidents versus other vans? There are a lot of studies. I'm not going to get into all of that here today. You're welcome to look that up. It is a fun study online. I would look in particular at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's work in that area, because there's sort of a third-party, well-recognized organization. They have some good information on that and multiple studies on that topic. It's of course not so much that they crash more than other vans, it's that they are poorly designed for the crashes that happen. And they do have some propensities, unfortunately, for accidents. So managing drivers. This is another issue that is connected with 15 passenger vans, but it's true of any vehicle. You might do okay with a 15 passenger van if you had somebody who is really experienced and knowledgeable and understood how to drive that size, weight type of vehicle. And it gets a lot worse, of course, if you have somebody who is not experienced and does not know how to drive that kind of vehicle. Most vehicles have a gas pedal and a wheel, but understanding where the braking point is on a vehicle that's loaded up with people or not, it's quite a bit different than driving your smaller minivan or regular SUV. So something to look into. You want drivers with great records. Church recommendation is that the drivers be at least 21 years of age. I hate numbers because they provide these little benchmarks, right? And it's like, okay, well, the person was 21, so we're fine. Not necessarily. I've met lots of people who were quite a bit older than I am now, who I think are terrible drivers. I've also met young people who are great drivers. What this is trying to do is help us understand that inexperienced drivers do represent a risk, right? So we need to use this information to find the best drivers, not use it as just a checkbox of, well, they were 21, they were fine. You want to screen your drivers. MVA testing can be coordinated through your conference in most cases. You want to make sure that they have the proper licensing. Depending on the state that you're in, some vehicles, such as a 15 passenger van, which we're not advocating driving, in some places they're going to need a different license than in other other states. So that's not true everywhere, but you're going to need to know what's required for what vehicle and make sure you have people who are properly licensed um, doing your driving. And then, of course, manage the drivers. I was listening to a story the day before yesterday about somebody who was engaged in a school trip, and they were given a van, not a 15-passenger van, some sort of, I think it was a bus actually, and a whole bunch of kids in there. And there were 3 or 4 buses on this trip. And unfortunately, that individual, the driver, was the only adult on that vehicle. And that's, they were complaining about the behavior of at least one of the kids on their bus, and they couldn't solve the problem from the driver's seat, right? And they shouldn't be solving the problem from the driver's seat. Sometimes you can't do cell phones and eating and supervision and drive a car or a bus. So make sure that supervision and all of those other tasks are being handled by someone else. Another resource we want to make you aware of is the vehicle pre-trip inspection form. I call it a pre-trip inspection form. You could also do this after trips. That would be a good idea as well. And it's basically just a quick check to see, are your basics in place, like your fluids and lights working and all of that good stuff. It's just a documentable way to check to see where you're at with that vehicle before you go. That can be useful. Documentation is actually very, very helpful, and it helps you know when it's time to get service done that you didn't expect. But on the topic of service, make sure, and a safety officer can help spearhead this, that if you own vehicles at your church, that they're on a systematic maintenance schedule, not just oh, you know what, this seems like a good idea, let's get the truck serviced. Well, no, it should be serviced in a systematic way. Okay, so we're going to look at incidents here. Again, a resource, an accident incident report. I do want to mention this is not a claim form. This is not meant to be sent to Adventist Risk Management to file a claim. This is, again, I think I told you a little scenario earlier on in the presentation, talking about somebody fell at potluck or whatnot, right? And this would be a little resource you could use to document that incident. Visit the scene. Is the person okay? Do they need to go to the hospital? Send them to the emergency room. And then write this down. Who saw what? When did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen? This is some of those basic fact gathering things in a tool for you. It's a fillable form. You could fill it out on a tablet if you wanted, or you could just print them off and write it down. But what this does is it gives you information that you may never need again. But what if you kept having similar incidents taking place? You would now have documentation on a trend. What if the same person keeps getting injured at your church? Or what if some different people keep getting injured in the same place or for the same reason? Or what if the something that didn't seem to be an issue became an issue 6 or 12 months later? Having that documentation is going to give you a really good reference point of, okay, here's what actually happened. Multiple people said they saw this, this, and this. So that can be very, very helpful for a number of good reasons. If something does happen, let's be Christian. When people slip and fall or whatever it is that takes place, we want to be caring for them. That doesn't mean that we're saying, hey, don't worry about it, we're going to pay for everything. You don't have to make promises that you may not be able to keep. Just do some basic fact gathering, be kind, and look into what can be done. You may need to speak with your conference office to talk about, we kind of feel like maybe there's a claim coming up here. Let them know. We're happy to help from Adventist Risk Management if you give us a call as well. So just be careful as you go through through that, not to say things that assign yourself blame that maybe you're not actually responsible for. I've discovered in a lot of cases people may assume that they're at fault, and they have no idea what other facts have a bearing on the incident. So don't start there anyway. If you do need to file a claim with Adventist Risk Management, that information's on our website. It's pretty much everywhere we can put it. But here it is again. We have a 800 or an 888 number that you can call. There's our email address, claims@adventistrisk.org. And again, you can see everything we have at adventistrisk.org. I just want to close with this idea. We can absolutely make a difference for our church, not just in safety. This is more than safety. This is about preserving the mission of our church and the ministries of our church, and staying focused on what it is we're here to do. This is about people's lives and caring for their well-being. So I think this is a really critical partnership in the ministries of our church. I really appreciate each of you for joining us for this webinar, and for the ways that you lead in ministry at each of your locations. I wish I knew all of you personally. I do recognize a few names there, and I really, really thank you for what it is that you're doing. So if I didn't catch every question, and I did see a few that I wasn't able to answer in this format here, we'll be happy to connect with you offline afterwards. But thank you so much, and let's go make a difference for safety in our churches. Thank you.